I was standing in my driveway when Karen strutted over, clipboard in hand like she was about to audit the Pentagon itself. Her voice had that nasal edge she reserved for official HOA business, though our HOA meetings were usually just 10 neighbors sipping lukewarm coffee at the clubhouse. She tapped the clipboard against her palm and declared, loud enough for the mailman across the street to hear, "You've been warned 3 times. If you don't clear out that garage, the HOA has the authority to seize it." I laughed, probably louder than I should have, and said, "Seize it? What do you think this is, medieval England?" Her lips tightened into a thin, triumphant line. "The bylaws give me full power. You're storing illegal equipment in there." She leaned closer like she expected me to whisper a confession. I just tilted my head and asked, "Illegal, huh? Who told you that?" "The squirrels." She glanced past me toward the garage, her eyes hungry, like the door itself was keeping secrets from her. And in a way it was, because behind that door, hidden under tarps and boring stacks of paint cans, wasn't junk, wasn't contraband, and wasn't anything she could begin to understand. What Karen didn't know was that my garage wasn't just mine. The FBI had set up inside. Now, let me rewind before you think I'm living in some spy novel. I didn't choose this setup. I didn't ask for agents with laptops, wires, and unmarked vans that shuffled around every week. It all started when my brother-in-law, who just so happens to work in federal law enforcement, needed a quiet, low-traffic place near the lake to run a short-term operation. My detached garage fit the bill perfectly. In exchange, they paid me rent that covered my mortgage. All I had to do was act normal and tell no one. The problem was, Karen's entire existence revolved around sniffing out things she wasn't supposed to know. And she had been circling my property like a hawk for weeks, trying to figure out why I didn't park my car in the garage anymore. That afternoon she got bolder. She shoved the clipboard at me and demanded I sign a compliance acknowledgement. I scanned it and nearly choked on my coffee. It claimed I was harboring non-compliant structures and posing a risk to community safety. I looked her dead in the eye and asked, "Do you even know what's in my garage?" She smirked. "I don't need to know. I can feel it. And if you don't open that door by tomorrow, the HOA will." She spun on her heels and marched off, certain she'd rattled me. But inside I was grinning. Karen had no clue that opening that garage without clearance would drop her straight into a nest of armed federal agents who didn't take kindly to uninvited guests. The irony was perfect. Karen, who lived for neighborhood gossip and dreamed of absolute control, was about to stumble headfirst into something far bigger than her petty power games. And I had a front-row seat to watch it unfold. I shut the front door, leaned against it, and whispered to myself, "Oh, Karen, you have no idea what storm you just invited." The next 24 hours would decide everything. Would I warn the FBI? Would I let her walk right into her own humiliation? Or would I play the long game, like I always do, and let the chaos spiral just enough to teach her a lesson she'd never forget? Either way, I knew one thing. My garage was the last place on earth she wanted to break into. The morning after Karen's clipboard performance began with the usual chaos of our street, dogs barking at mail trucks, sprinklers sputtering to life, and Karen pacing around her yard in a neon bathrobe like she was directing traffic at an airport. I sipped my coffee from the porch and watched her wave her phone at neighbors, no doubt rallying her small army of HOA faithful. By the way she moved, with exaggerated hand gestures and clipped sentences, you would have thought she was announcing the discovery of nuclear waste in my garage. In reality, she had no idea what she was poking at. But Karen never let ignorance stop her from acting like a general in a war no one else was fighting. At 9 sharp, she stomped back across the street, flanked by her 2 most loyal disciples, Marge, who believed every conspiracy Facebook offered her, and Tom, who never missed an opportunity to inflate his sense of authority. They carried clipboards too, though it was obvious Karen had printed out the same compliance acknowledgement 3 times just to look official. She cleared her throat, raised her chin, and announced, We are here to enforce community standards. I leaned against my porch railing, mug still in hand. Enforce? You three look like you're about to audition for a bad courtroom drama. Marge frowned. Don't be disrespectful. Karen has the authority to demand access to your garage. Authority, I repeated, letting the word hang. Marge, the last time you tried to enforce authority, you called animal control on a plastic Halloween skeleton. Let's not pretend you're the law. Karen ignored me, turning instead to Tom, who pulled a tape measure from his pocket like a magician revealing a sword. We'll document everything, he said proudly. Dimensions, violations, safety hazards. I glanced at the garage, then back at them, and forced myself not to laugh. The idea of these three marching in with rulers and accusations, only to run into a row of laptops wired into encrypted servers manned by actual FBI agents, was almost too much. I decided not to interfere just yet. Letting them dig their own graves was always more satisfying than shoveling for them. Still, I had to be careful. One panicked call from inside that garage could unravel everything. So I slipped inside the house, dialed the number my brother-in-law had given me, and waited. After 2 rings, a low voice answered, "Control." "It's me," I said. "Listen, we may have a situation. The HOA president thinks she's about to seize my garage." There was a pause, then muffled laughter. "You're kidding." "I wish. She's got 2 backup dancers with her and clipboards. If they push the door open, it's going to get awkward real fast." The agent cleared his throat. "We'll keep it discreet, but don't stop them. If she crosses the line, we'll handle it." I smirked. Music to my ears. By the time I stepped back outside, Karen and her entourage were in full performance mode, taking pictures of my lawn, measuring my mailbox, and loudly debating whether or not my trash bins violated placement standard. Every car that drove past slowed to watch the circus, and I could see neighbors pulling out phones to film. Nothing spread faster in our subdivision than footage of Karen mid-rant. Finally, Karen marched up to the garage and slammed her clipboard against the door. "This is your final warning. The HOA is reclaiming this property." I put on my most serious face. "Reclaim? Karen, it's not a community garden. It's a garage. My garage." Her nostrils flared. "You're hiding illegal equipment in here. The bylaws clearly state that you have no jurisdiction inside private structures," I interrupted smoothly. "But don't let me stop you. If you think you've got the guts, by all means, open it." The bait dangled perfectly, and I could see the hunger in her eyes. She wanted to prove me wrong so badly that logic had already left the building. She grabbed Tom's arm and barked, "Help me with this door." Neighbors drifted closer. Cameras lifted. The audience had gathered, and Karen loved an audience more than oxygen. She shoved her clipboard into Marge's hands and began tugging at the handle like she expected it to just roll up and reveal my dark secret. Tom puffed out his chest and joined in, and together they grunted and strained until, click, the latch gave. The door creaked upward. That's when the entire situation tilted. Instead of dusty shelves or piles of paint cans, Karen's eyes met the dim glow of monitors. The faint hum of servers spilled into the driveway. And sitting calmly at a fold-out table, headphones around his neck, was a man in plain clothes who looked up slowly from his screen. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice flat. Karen froze, clipboard slipping in her sweaty hands. Marge gasped. Tom's mouth flapped open like a fish. None of them had expected an actual human inside, much less one radiating the kind of unshakable calm that screamed federal authority. I crossed my arms. "Well, Karen? Looks like you got your look inside. Satisfied?" She blinked, fumbling for words, then jabbed a shaky finger at the agent. Who are you? Why are you in here? This is against code." The agent didn't move, didn't even raise his voice. "Ma'am, you need to step back. Now." The weight in his tone cut through the air. Karen shuffled backward, her bravado cracking in real time. Neighbors murmured, cameras zoomed in. For once, Karen wasn't dictating the narrative, she was trapped in it. I leaned closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. Careful. That garage doesn't belong to you, and you just barged into the wrong kind of business. Her face twisted between rage and panic. This isn't over, she hissed. But the damage was already done. She had cracked the door wide enough for the neighborhood to glimpse something far beyond HOA dispute. She had lost control of her own story. And deep down, she knew it. By the time she stormed back across the street, dragging Marge and Tom behind her, I couldn't stop the grin spreading across my face. Karen thought she'd won by prying open my garage. What she didn't realize was that the FBI had just marked her down as a person of interest, not because of what she knew, but because of how hard she'd tried to know it. And I had no intention of warning her, because sometimes the best way to deal with Karen wasn't to fight her directly, it was to let her walk straight into the kind of trouble she couldn't charm, threaten, or clipboard her way out of. The game had officially changed. The fallout began before Karen even made it back across the street. By the time she slammed her front door, the neighborhood had erupted into a frenzy of whispered gossip, muffled laughter, and buzzing phones. It didn't take long for clips of her confrontation to surface online in our local community group chat. By noon, 3 different neighbors had texted me links to videos of Karen tugging at my garage like it was a slot machine about to spit out coins. The best angle was from Jake, the teenage neighbor who never missed a chance to film drama. He'd zoomed in just enough to catch the moment the door cracked open and the agent's calm, razor-edged stare froze her mid-yank. The comments were brutal. People called her Sheriff Clipboard, Garage Karen, and my personal favorite, Neighborhood Napoleon. Normally, Karen thrived on attention, but this time it wasn't admiration. It was mockery. And Karen couldn't stand being the punchline. By mid-afternoon, she re-emerged in a fresh outfit, this time a stiff pantsuit, as though dressing like a lawyer could erase the morning's embarrassment. She strode over to my porch again, no entourage this time, her eyes narrow and voice low. "You set me up," she hissed. I raised an eyebrow. "You opened the door yourself, Karen." "I was just enjoying my coffee." Her jaw tightened. "There was a man in there. What is he doing in your garage?" I shrugged. "You tell me. You're the one who barged in." Her nostrils flared. "I'll get answers. And when I do, you'll regret this." Before I could answer, she spun on her heels and stormed off. I watched her pace back and forth across her driveway, furiously texting on her phone. I didn't need to see the screen to know what she was doing, rallying reinforcements. Karen couldn't stand losing face. If she couldn't intimidate me directly, she'd escalate by dragging in as many people as possible. Sure enough, by evening, a group of HOA board members gathered outside her house. They clustered like vultures, heads bent, arms crossed, nodding solemnly as Karen waved her phone around and recounted her version of events. I could hear snippets of her voice drifting across the cul-de-sac. Illegal operation, community safety at risk, national security threat. It was classic Karen. Take something she didn't understand, wrap it in paranoia, and weaponize it against whoever stood in her way. But this time, the more she pushed, the more she risked walking into something bigger than herself. That night, I received another call from my brother-in-law. "We saw the footage," he said, his tone half amusement, half warning. "Your HOA president has made herself a little too curious. We're monitoring her." "Monitoring her?" I asked. "Let's just say she's pinged our radar. People who dig too hard into things they shouldn't usually dig for a reason." I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of that sink in. Karen thought she was the hunter, sniffing out violations and demanding obedience. She didn't realize she'd just stepped into a chess match where she was the weakest piece on the board. The next morning proved me right. At exactly 8 a.m., Karen marched to the clubhouse with a box of donuts under her arm, a bribe, no doubt, to lure more board members into her crusade. By 9, she had assembled a full panel, complete with a folding table, bottled water, and a gavel she must have ordered online. She even sent out a mandatory emergency HOA meeting text to the entire neighborhood. The turnout was huge. Neighbors filed into the clubhouse, buzzing with curiosity. Nobody wanted to miss the next act in Karen's unraveling play. I took a seat in the back row, blending into the crowd. Karen stood at the front like a dictator addressing her nation. "Neighbors," she began, voice sharp, "yesterday we discovered highly suspicious activity inside one of our community's garages." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Karen raised her chin. "I personally witnessed a stranger, an intruder, using this private garage as a command center. We must assume this activity is dangerous and illegal. For the safety of our children, our property values, and our community, we cannot allow this to continue." I almost laughed out loud at property values. That was Karen's holy grail, the word she wielded like a weapon. But then she pulled out her phone and projected a blurry freeze frame from Jake's video, the shot of the agent sitting calmly at his laptop. Gasps filled the room. Karen slammed her hand on the table. "This man is not a resident. He is not authorized. And yet he occupies a structure inside our neighborhood. I propose immediate seizure of the garage pending investigation." The room erupted. Some neighbors muttered agreement, others rolled their eyes, and a few whispered that Karen was finally losing it. I stayed quiet, watching the chaos unfold. Finally, Ruth, one of the oldest and sharpest residents, stood up. Her voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Karen, do you have any idea what you're suggesting? You want to trespass on someone else's property? That's illegal." Karen shot back, "It's for the greater good. We cannot ignore this threat." Ruth folded her arms. "The only threat around here is your obsession with control." The crowd buzzed louder. Karen's face reddened, and for the first time, cracks appeared in her armor. She pounded the gavel so hard it nearly broke the folding table. "Silence," she shrieked. "If the board won't act, I will." And with that, she stormed out, her heels clacking against the linoleum, leaving the room in stunned silence. I leaned back in my chair, smiling, because I knew exactly what her next move would be. She wouldn't retreat. Karen never retreated. No, she'd double down. She'd try to dig deeper, to force her way past the wall of mystery she'd glimpsed inside my garage. What she didn't know was that the FBI had already decided to keep her under a quiet microscope. Her texts, her calls, her frantic attempts to rally allies, every move she made now fed into their files. By the time I walked home, I knew two things for certain. 1. Karen was about to escalate to a level none of us had ever seen before. And 2. For the first time, her endless thirst for power wasn't just annoying. It was dangerous, because when an HOA president starts a war with the federal government, someone always gets burned. And my only question was how long it would take before Karen realized she was the one standing in the fire. I woke the next morning to the sound of sirens, not close, but close enough to make me sit up in bed and check the window. A police cruiser idled 2 streets over, its lights flickering in the early dawn. My stomach sank because I already knew what it meant. Karen had decided to play her biggest card yet. She hadn't been embarrassed enough at the HOA meeting, hadn't been satisfied with whisper campaigns and clipboard theatrics. No, Karen had gone straight to the local police. By the time I made it to my porch with a mug of coffee, Karen was already in full performance mode on her lawn. She wore another pantsuit, this one beige with shoulder pads that made her look like she was auditioning for a 1980s courtroom drama. Her arms flailed as she pointed toward my house, then back to the garage, and the 2 officers standing in front of her nodded politely, but without urgency. You could tell they'd already pegged her as that neighbor before they even left their cruiser. I ambled down the steps and wandered toward the property line just in time to catch her declaration. "He's harboring dangerous individuals. They've infiltrated our neighborhood. For all we know, they could be running drugs, weapons, or worse." The younger officer scratched his neck. "Ma'am, have you actually seen any illegal activity?" Karen jabbed her finger toward my garage like it was a smoking gun. I saw with my own eyes a strange man using advanced surveillance equipment inside that garage. I demand you search it immediately. I sipped my coffee. Morning, officers. If you'd like a donut and a rational conversation, you're welcome to come over to my porch. If you'd like to entertain conspiracy theories, you already have the right address. Karen whirled on me. Don't act smug. They're going to tear that place apart and expose you. The older officer held up his hand. Ma'am, that's not how it works. We'd need probable cause and a warrant. Garages aren't public property. Karen's face turned crimson. But the HOA bylaws don't override the Constitution, I cut in smoothly. The younger cop chuckled before catching himself and clearing his throat. Karen's mouth opened and closed like she was searching for a retort but couldn't find one. She stomped her foot. Yes, actually stomped it. Then barked, "You're making a mistake. You'll regret this when the truth comes out." The officers exchanged a look, muttered something about civil dispute, and climbed back into their cruiser. As they pulled away, Karen stood frozen in her yard, fists clenched, watching her authority crumble like wet cardboard. That should have been the end of it, but I knew better. Karen had lost credibility with the local cops, which meant she'd escalate again. She always escalated. And sure enough, 2 days later, I spotted a pair of men in suits canvassing the neighborhood. Not the FBI suits I'd grown used to, theirs were sharp but understated, the kind that let them disappear in plain sight. These guys were loud. Cheap sunglasses, shiny shoes, haircuts that screamed rented power. They knocked on doors, flashed badges too quickly to read, and asked loaded questions about me. Did I have strange visitors? Did I make late-night deliveries? Had anyone noticed suspicious activity around my garage? Jake caught the whole thing on camera from his second-floor window and sent me the footage. I recognized the pattern immediately. Karen had called in another kind of cavalry. Private investigators. She'd actually hired a firm to dig into me, probably with HOA funds she manipulated out of the budget. I should have been annoyed, but mostly I was curious. How far would she go before she realized the deeper she dug, the closer she got to a wall she couldn't climb? That night, I received another call from my brother-in-law. "Heads up," he said. "Your HOA president just kicked the hornet's nest. She brought in PIs. Sloppy ones. We've flagged them." "What happens now?" I asked. "We let them look. Everything they find will circle back to her. If she tries to weaponize it, we step in." I swirled the last of my coffee in the mug, thinking. "You're telling me the FBI is about to turn Karen's obsession into a noose she ties around her own neck?" "Exactly," he said. Over the next week, Karen's obsession metastasized into full paranoia. She stopped waving at neighbors and instead lurked behind her blinds, snapping photos whenever someone walked past my driveway. She held 3 emergency HOA sessions in the clubhouse, each less attended than the last. By the final one, only Marge and Tom showed up, and even they looked exhausted. Karen ranted about infiltrators and national threats, her voice echoing in the empty hall, until Tom finally muttered that maybe she was overreacting. That crack in her foundation widened quickly. Neighbors started avoiding her altogether. Parents crossed the street with strollers just to sidestep her glare. Even the mailman began delivering her letters with a stiff arm, like she was contagious. But instead of retreating, Karen doubled down again. She printed flyers warning of unknown operatives living among us and stuffed them in mailboxes. She called the county zoning board demanding they shut down my illegal operation. She even drove to City Hall and tried to file an injunction to have my garage condemned. And through it all, I remained calm. Sarcastic when necessary, restrained when possible, but always one step behind the curtain, letting her dig deeper while the FBI quietly built their case. The breaking point came on a Wednesday morning. I was tightening the hinges on my fence gate when a caravan of black SUVs rolled into the neighborhood. At first, I thought it was the FBI making a quiet shift in their operation. But no, these weren't their vehicles. They were larger, gaudier, and lacked the subtlety of professionals. Karen burst out of her house like a general greeting her troops, practically skipping as she led them toward my garage. She shouted, "This is it! This is the illegal command center I've been telling you about." The men didn't hesitate. They swarmed my driveway, cameras and notebooks ready, acting like they were on the cusp of uncovering the Watergate scandal. Neighbors poured out of their homes to watch. Phones went up again. Jake climbed onto his roof for a better angle. Karen turned to the crowd, triumphant. "You'll all thank me when this threat is exposed." And then, perfectly timed like a stage cue, the garage door opened. Not from Karen, not from the investigators, but from the inside. Out stepped two men in dark suits, calm as stone, credentials flashing at eye level. Real credentials. The crowd hushed. Karen blinked, her mouth opening to deliver some smug line, but the taller agent cut her off. "This property is under federal jurisdiction. Any unauthorized entry is a violation of federal law." The fake investigators froze. Their sunglasses suddenly looked a lot cheaper. One tried to stammer an explanation, but the agent's glare shut him down cold. The other started backing away toward the SUV. Karen, still riding the high of her imagined authority, pushed forward. "Finally! Yes, arrest him. Arrest the homeowner for harboring." The second agent stepped toward her. "Ma'am, you need to stop talking." It was the first time I'd ever seen Karen obey a command without hesitation. She stopped mid-sentence, color draining from her face as the weight of the situation began to dawn on her. The agents turned their attention to the investigators. "We'll be taking your information," the taller one said flatly. Now. The morning of the showdown began deceptively quiet. The sun rose over the cul-de-sac, birds chirped, sprinklers ticked back and forth across manicured lawns. For a brief, surreal moment, you might have believed our neighborhood was just another peaceful suburb. But I knew better. Karen's silence wasn't surrender. It was the kind of eerie calm before the sky rips open. At precisely 7 a.m., she emerged from her house, not in her usual blazer or robe, but in something almost militaristic: dark pants, a button-down shirt, and a baseball cap with "Community Defense" embroidered across the front. She carried a megaphone in one hand and a thick folder of papers in the other. Marge trailed behind her, red-faced and embarrassed, clearly dragged along against her will. Karen marched into the center of the cul-de-sac, planted herself like a general at the head of an army she didn't have, and flipped on the megaphone. Her voice boomed through the neighborhood, jolting kids, dogs, and anyone still asleep out of their beds. "Attention, residents," she cried. "Today, justice will be restored in our community. For too long we have been silenced, ignored, and infiltrated. But no more. The truth inside that garage will be exposed, and we will reclaim our neighborhood." Curtains fluttered open. Neighbors leaned on porches. Phones clicked to record. Jake scrambled onto his roof again, camera already rolling. The show had begun. I stayed on my porch, mug in hand, and simply watched. Across the street, the garage door remained shut, its bland beige facade hiding layers of tension that were about to snap. Karen raised the folder dramatically. "These are the documents proving illegal occupation, zoning violations, and community endangerment. I hereby declare this garage seized under emergency HOA authority." She slammed the papers against her hip like a sheriff drawing a revolver, then signaled to Marge. Together, they began a slow, theatrical march toward my driveway. The crowd murmured. Some laughed outright. Others whispered nervously. And all the while, my heart rate never spiked. I already knew how this was going to end. Because the FBI wasn't waiting anymore. Karen reached the garage and lifted the megaphone again. "Last chance. Surrender your illegal operation, or we will enter by force." I called across the yard, voice calm. "Karen, you should really rethink this." She sneered. "You can't scare me with your smugness. This community belongs to the people, not infiltrators like you." And with that, she handed the megaphone to Marge, grabbed a crowbar she'd hidden in her folder of documents, and jammed it under the garage door. The crowd gasped as the metal screeched. The door shuddered, lifted an inch. Then the world tilted. 3 black SUVs appeared at the end of the street, engines growling. They rolled in slow, deliberate formation, stopping nose to nose with Karen's little performance. Doors opened. Out stepped agents in dark suits, their movements crisp, their expressions unreadable. The crowd went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop, or in this case, the crowbar clattering out of Karen's hand. The lead agent approached, badge raised. His voice carried across the entire street. "Federal Bureau of Investigation. Step away from the garage." Karen blinked, her mouth opening, then closing. She stammered, I'm the HOA president. I have authority here." The agent's stare could have frozen steel. "Ma'am, you are interfering with an active federal operation. Put down any tools and step back immediately." Marge nearly fainted. She shoved the megaphone into Karen's chest and scuttled backward like a crab. Karen, however, tried to cling to her shrinking power. "You can't just take over our neighborhood," she cried, voice cracking. "These people deserve to know what's going on. This is a cover-up. Property values will plummet." The agent raised a hand, silencing her. "Ma'am, one more word and you'll be detained for obstruction." A ripple of shock moved through the neighbors. Phones filmed every second. Karen's eyes darted from face to face, searching for support, but all she found were smirks, pity, and quiet glee. For once, the neighborhood had turned on her completely. And then, in true Karen fashion, she made the worst possible decision. She lunged for the garage door. It happened in a blink. 2 agents stepped forward, securing her arms before she could even touch the handle. The megaphone hit the pavement with a hollow crack. Karen shrieked, twisting and thrashing, but the agents didn't flinch. They cuffed her with practiced efficiency, their calm a perfect contrast to her hysteria. The crowd erupted. Some gasped, some cheered, some just stood frozen, mouths hanging open. Jake's camera zoomed in gleefully. Ruth muttered, finally, under her breath. Karen screamed over her shoulder as they led her toward the SUV. "You're all blind. You'll regret this. I'm the only one protecting you." The door slammed shut, muffling her ranting. The agents turned back to the neighborhood. The lead one addressed the crowd in measured tones. "This matter is under federal jurisdiction. You may return to your homes. There is no threat to your safety." The reassurance didn't stop the buzzing excitement. Neighbors chattered, pointing, whispering. Phones blew up with notifications as clips of Karen's arrest shot into group chats faster than wildfire. Within minutes, the neighborhood was a carnival of gossip. As the SUVs pulled away, I finished the last sip of my coffee, calm as ever. I hadn't raised my voice once. I hadn't lifted a finger. Karen had orchestrated her own downfall, step by step, refusing to see that the stage she'd built for herself was a trap she'd never escape. And the best part? This wasn't even the end. That night, my brother-in-law called again. "She's in holding. We're sorting out charges, obstruction, attempted interference, maybe more depending on her little PI stunt. But don't worry. She's not coming near your garage again anytime soon." I chuckled. "She'll come back though. People like Karen always come back." He sighed. "Then let her. At this point, she's digging her own grave." I hung up, leaned back in my chair, and let the weight of the day settle in. 4 months, Karen had played her game of control, manipulation, and clipboard theatrics. She'd declared war on lawns, fences, mailboxes, and now, unknowingly, the federal government. And today, she finally crossed the line she could never uncross. The neighborhood had seen it all, her arrogance, her paranoia, her downfall in handcuffs. And as the videos spread online, Karen wasn't just infamous on our street anymore. She was becoming a cautionary tale far beyond it. Still, something told me this wasn't her final act. Karen was too stubborn to vanish quietly. Whether it was in meetings, lawsuits, or whispered schemes, she would try to claw her way back into the spotlight. But for the first time, she wasn't the one holding power. Now the FBI had her number, and I had a front-row seat to watch what happened next. If you thought a normal person would have stopped after being stared down by federal agents on their own neighbor's driveway, you'd be right. Most people would have gone inside, pulled their blinds shut, and prayed nobody remembered their name. But Karen was not most people. Humiliation didn't teach her humility, it fueled her rage. For the next 48 hours, the neighborhood settled into an uneasy silence. No flyers, no public tirades, no emergency meetings at the clubhouse. At first, some of us thought she'd finally gotten the message. Maybe, just maybe, she'd crawl back into her own business and leave mine alone. But Karen's quiet wasn't peace. It was planning. On the third morning, I caught her in the backyard, phone pressed to her ear, pacing like a general on the eve of battle. Her words drifted through the still air, just loud enough for me to catch phrases. Media exposure, corruption, cover-up, national scandal. She wasn't retreating, she was going nuclear. If the police and private investigators couldn't hand her a victory, she'd try to weaponize public opinion. By lunchtime it started. A local, neighborhood issues Facebook group exploded with posts from accounts suspiciously new. Each one parroted the same talking points: dangerous activity hidden in our community, neighbors silenced by corrupt forces, think of the children. The fingerprints were obvious. Karen had either made the accounts herself or conscripted her shrinking fan club to post for her. Then, at 3 p.m., she made her grandest move yet. Standing on her front lawn with Marge reluctantly filming, Karen delivered a live stream to anyone who would watch. She framed the camera just so, chin raised, flagpole fluttering behind her house like she was declaring independence from tyranny. "My fellow citizens," she began, her voice quivering with righteous fury, "I have uncovered undeniable evidence of federal infiltration in our neighborhood. Our homes, our safety, and our children's future are under threat. My pleas to law enforcement have been ignored, my concerns dismissed. But I will not be silenced. Today, I call upon higher powers. The FBI may think they can intimidate me, but I will expose them. I will call Washington if I have to." The comments scrolled faster than she could read. Half mocked her mercilessly, with gifs of tinfoil hats and memes about alien invasions. The other half, strangers outside our neighborhood, egg her on, thrilled at the spectacle. By the end of the hour, her stream had racked up thousands of views, most of them rubberneckers watching her unravel in real time. I should have been furious. She had dragged my garage into the public eye, risked exposing something meant to stay invisible. But I wasn't furious. I was patient. Because what Karen didn't know was that the FBI already had her stream flagged, downloaded, and dissected by analysts. Every wild accusation, every baseless claim, every public declaration of a federal cover-up, all of it went straight into her growing file. That evening, I got another call from my brother-in-law. "She's just volunteered for enhanced attention," he said dryly. "We're moving faster now." "How much faster?" I asked. "Let's just say we've adjusted our timetable. Your HOA president doesn't realize it, but she's one call away from tripping alarms she can't unring." The following morning proved him right. At dawn, Karen staged another stunt. She marched across the cul-de-sac in a blazer far too formal for suburban sidewalks, holding a manila envelope stuffed with papers. She taped one to my garage door like it was a royal decree, then planted herself on the curb, arms folded, waiting for me to notice. I did, of course. The notice was a cease and desist written in grandiose language, filled with words like hereby and whereas, complete with a signature line where she'd scribbled HOA President, Acting Authority. It demanded that I vacate the garage within 24 hours or face community seizure of assets. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. "Karen," I called across the yard, "if you're going to threaten someone, at least use legal paper." Printer stock doesn't exactly scream credibility. She didn't flinch. Laugh while you can. Tomorrow I'm calling the media. Real reporters. They'll broadcast the truth. And she did. Or at least she tried. By noon, a battered news van with a local station's logo trundled down our street. Out hopped a young reporter eager for a scoop, microphone in hand. Karen practically dragged him to my driveway, spinning her tale of federal spies and illegal operations. The camera crew looked skeptical, but news was news, and they set up anyway. The reporter approached me politely. "Sir, would you like to comment on allegations of suspicious federal activity in your garage?" I sipped my coffee. "Sure. The allegation is coming from a woman who once reported a garden gnome as a security threat. Take that as you will." Laughter rippled through the gathered neighbors. Karen's face burned crimson. Before she could fire back, the garage door opened again. 2 agents stepped out, calm, professional, credentials visible. One spoke directly into the camera. "This is an active federal operation. Broadcasting any further could obstruct national security. Turn off the cameras." The cameraman froze, then lowered his lens. The reporter stammered something about respecting boundaries. Within minutes, the crew packed up and left, visibly shaken. Karen, however, wasn't deterred. She screamed at them as they drove off, "Don't let them silence you. This is tyranny." But her words fell flat, echoing against the quiet houses. Neighbors shook their heads, some recording again, others retreating inside to avoid the circus. That night, Karen's desperation hit a fever pitch. From my living room window, I watched her lights flicker on and off until nearly midnight. She was making calls, pacing, tearing through papers. She was preparing something reckless enough to claw back the authorities slipping through her fingers. And just before I went to bed, my phone buzzed with one final message from my brother-in-law. "Tell your neighbors to lock their doors tomorrow. She's not finished. And we're moving in." I set the phone down, heart steady, mind racing. Karen thought she was tightening the noose around me. She didn't realize she'd looped it around her own neck instead. Tomorrow, the game would stop being entertainment. Tomorrow, Karen's obsession would stop being neighborhood drama and start being federal business. And I couldn't wait to see the look on her face when she finally realized she wasn't the hunter anymore. She was the prey. The footage of Karen's arrest spread faster than anything our sleepy neighborhood had ever seen. Within hours, it jumped from local group chats to the broader internet. By dinner time, someone had cut together a highlight reel with dramatic music, complete with captions like, "HOA gone too far" and "Karen vs. FBI. The final showdown." Jake, the teenager with a talent for catching every meltdown on camera, practically became a minor celebrity overnight. His video hit 500,000 views before midnight. As for Karen, she spent the night in holding, her voice echoing in bureaucratic hallways no one cared to hear. My brother-in-law called me the next morning. "We're letting her out with conditions," he said. "Obstruction and interference are on the table, but we're not pressing federal charges unless she pushes harder. Think of it as a leash. One wrong tug and she'll snap it herself." I leaned back in my chair, watching the sunlight creep across the garage door that had caused all this chaos. "So she'll come back." He chuckled. "You know her better than we do." He wasn't wrong. Karen's spirit wasn't built for retreat. Humiliation wasn't the end for her, it was fuel. I expected her to return the moment she could, but I didn't expect how different the neighborhood would feel in her absence. The next HOA meeting, held in the clubhouse 3 days later, was the largest turnout we'd ever had. Dozens of neighbors crowded into the room, buzzing with a mixture of excitement and relief. Ruth took the floor first, clearing her throat. "We need to address the obvious," she said bluntly. "Our president has crossed a line. More than one line. She's endangered this community, embarrassed us in front of the world, and wasted everyone's time and money." Heads nodded. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. For once, the conversation wasn't dominated by Karen's shrill voice or her endless decrees. It was calm, measured, and free. Tom, usually Karen's lapdog, raised his hand nervously. I think she meant well. She wanted to protect the neighborhood. Ruth turned on him. By breaking into someone else's garage with a crowbar? By calling in fake investigators? By dragging national agencies into our street like it was a stage play? That's not protection, Tom. That's reckless. The vote was swift, unanimous except for Tom and Marge's half-hearted abstentions. Karen was officially removed as HOA president. Her title, her power, her self-appointed throne, all gone in the span of 15 minutes. The neighbors exhaled in relief. For the first time in years, it felt like our community actually belonged to us again. Of course, Karen didn't take it well. She returned from holding with fire in her eyes, storming across lawns, demanding to know who had betrayed her. She shouted about lawsuits, conspiracies, and deep state infiltration. But her audience was gone. Neighbors closed their blinds, muted her number, and blocked her online rant. Even her loyalists melted away under the weight of ridicule. She was no longer feared, she was pitied. The final nail came when the FBI made an unannounced visit to her doorstep. Not to arrest her, not to interrogate her, but to remind her in the calmest, coldest tones that they were watching. The sight of agents stepping onto her porch was enough to send her retreating inside. From then on, her voice, once booming across the cul-de-sac, dwindled into occasional mutters through curtained windows. Meanwhile, life moved on. Kids played basketball in driveways without being yelled at for noise violations. Neighbors painted their fences whatever color they wanted. We held a block party on the corner, complete with barbecue, music, and laughter that echoed late into the night. And all the while, my garage sat quietly in the background, its secrets intact, its presence a silent reminder of just how far Karen had overreached. One night, as I stood by the grill flipping burgers, Ruth sidled up to me. She raised her glass and said, "You played that well. Never raised a fist, never shouted, never lost your cool. You just let her hang herself." I smiled. Sometimes the best move is to step aside and let the other person run headfirst into their own disaster. Jake, holding his phone as always, chimed in. "Dude, you're like the neighborhood's Batman. Except instead of fighting crime, you just sip coffee and let people implode." I laughed. "Works for me." But inside, I felt something else, a quiet satisfaction. For months, Karen had been a storm I endured with patience and sarcasm. I hadn't needed revenge, not really. All I had to do was let her chase control so desperately that she lost it completely. Still, I knew this wasn't the absolute end of Karen. People like her don't vanish, they smolder. But now, whenever she so much as peeks her head out, she'll find a wall of neighbors united, not under her command but against her chaos. And if she ever tries to aim her fury at my garage again, she won't just meet me, she'll meet the quiet, watchful eyes of the Bureau, still stationed behind those doors. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had threatened to seize my garage, convinced it was hers to control. Instead, the only thing seized was her reputation, her power, her illusion of authority. The night of the block party, as laughter filled the street and Karen's windows stayed dark, I realized something important. The long game isn't about crushing your opponent outright. It's about letting them trip over their own lies, one step at a time, until they can't stand anymore. And Karen had tripped all the way into handcuff. I raised my glass, toasted the quiet hum of the neighborhood, and whispered to myself, "Game over, Karen." But deep down, I couldn't help but hope she'd try again someday. After all, every story needs a sequel.